Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are on Season 3, Episode 12, Past Tense, Part 2. This episode aired January 9th, 1995. Before we talk about this one, anything to correct from the previous podcast, which was Part 1?
No, it was perfect.
Well, I did have one tiny correction.
Ooh, what was that?
I actually said that episode aired January 9th, 1995, but this one aired January 9th, that one aired January 2nd. I don't know. I got the dates mixed up.
It's all January. We're all good.
Yeah. Well, and also I don't know that it aired exactly the same in all of the locations since it wasn't on a regular network. But this is the date that Hulu and IMDb gave me, so I'm sticking with it.
Go for it.
Well, should we get started?
I think so. Don't see why not.
We do get a last time on from Lwaxana Troi. We see Miles saying the transporter beam was redirected to a different time, not a different location. And then Sisko talking about the Bell riots and saying that he is Gabriel Bell. Big drama.
Yes.
And now it's time for the conclusion. In the cold open, the thuggy hat guy is harassing Bernardo, the younger Ghostbuster. He also threatens all of the hostages and acts menacing overall as he throws them all against a wall.
We do find out the young Ghostbuster is called Bernardo.
Yes.
And I went back and rewatched to find out what the older one was called. And he was called Vin, and he said his name right at the very beginning, and I totally missed that.
It didn't stick. Well, when Hat Guy threatens the hostages for the 20th time, Sisko reminds him that they need the hostages alive or they have nothing to bargain with. Then in comes the older Ghostbuster guy, armed and pointing his gun at Hat Guy. How he got in the door, I do not know, but he is wildly outnumbered. And when Hat Guy prepares to shoot him, Sisko jumps on the Ghostbuster, pushing the gun away. The gun goes off, hopefully not hitting anyone upstairs, but the commotion scares that DMV employee from the previous episode.
Yep.
And she starts screaming in panic. Hat Guy points the gun at her, which makes her scream more. Bashir shoves the gun down and helps calm her down. This guy with the hat, he is really itching to shoot someone.
Yes.
But also Ghostbuster number 1, who's Vin, was not too smart to come into a room of armed people and just be like, oh, put your gun down. I mean, he did not think that through.
Yeah, he did not seem to have a very well thought out plan there.
No.
I'm going to assume these guys are hired because they're cheap, not because they're terribly good at security. And I bet their training consists of read these pamphlets.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, that they're actually just private security and they're not particularly well trained.
Yeah.
Well, Sisko shoves Vin, Ghostbuster number 1, into the group of hostages. Hat Guy threatens everyone again, saying he needs somebody's access code so he can see what's being said about them on the net. I guess he wants to check his Twitter account. I don't know.
Yeah, he's going to tweet, #taking prisoners, #rioting.
Oh my gosh. The old Ghostbuster guy refuses, but the younger guy volunteers just to stop any other violence. This guy, Vin, the older Ghostbuster, he's played by a guy named Dick Miller. I don't know if you looked him up, but he's born in 1928.
Wow.
He has quite a long IMDb record, yeah. Well, anyway, Bernardo heads to the terminal to let Hat Guy onto the net. Sisko and Bashir are blocking the windows with benches to stop snipers from getting them, but the benches don't even go halfway up the windows, so this just seems like a silly plan.
Yeah, I was worried about that too. If they couldn't look over the benches.
Well, yeah, because Bashir said they'll put snipers on the roofs of the buildings across the street. And I'm sorry, but that would mean that they could see right through the top of the window because they're above you.
Exactly.
But the tops of the windows are wide open. I don't know. It was really stupid. Bashir says he's worried about Sisko since Bell was killed when the police stormed the building. Sisko says, but I'm not Bell. And Bashir says, right, but we're the only ones who know that. So, which is a good point.
I'm surprised Sisko hadn't thought that one all the way through.
Yeah, he just took the identity of a person whose death sparked outrage and changed the world. So, he kind of has to suffer the same fate for the same thing to happen.
Right.
Well, we cue the theme song, so I guess we'll find out. Now everyone is watching the news on Channel 90 on the net, and they're talking about the governor saying the uprising will be quelled and the district secured. It's not clear how the riots began, but rumors of mounting tensions have been filtering out of the district for weeks. Duh.
So it sounds like not only are the districts sealed off to keep people in, but they also are restricting any information coming out.
It does seem that way, yes.
That there's a deliberate policy to seal them off and keep the greater population unaware of what's really happening within them.
Well, they would sort of have to in order for it to work.
Yeah.
I mean, they're trying to wall it off from the upper class people on the outside, the so-called privileged. And that way they can feel better about themselves because they have no idea what's going on back there.
Right. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Hat Guy is stoked that they're on every channel, and he says they're probably even watching it in China. Which, I don't know, random. That was funny. He wonders why they sound so surprised that tensions are high in the district. He says if you treat people like animals, you're going to get bit.
Further confirmation that data flow coming out of sanctuary districts is limited.
Right. Well, then the dad that Sisko and Bashir met earlier comes in and joins the party. He asks Sisko what happened to the peaceful demonstration. Sisko says he knows it's not what they planned, but it's happened and now they have to deal with it. Sisko tells him to find some more gimmies to help guard the hostages. Just a reminder, the gimmies from the previous episode are just jobless people stuck in the district.
Yeah.
We learn this guy's name is Webb, and he's played by Bill Smitrovich. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce his name, but he has a very familiar face and a long, long list of acting credits.
Yet another one of those million TV show actors.
Exactly.
We do see some good strategic thinking from Sisko here. He seems very aware that the people who've been leading this hostage taking and the takeover of the building are ghosts, that dangerous section of the sanctuary district. And recruiting Webb to bring in a more moderate element and aren't going to kill people the first time they get angry seems to be a very smart move.
I'm not really clear on the difference between the gimmies and the ghosts.
The DMV employee said that the ghosts were people who preyed on other residents.
So they're really just like the underbelly of this group? Or, I mean, what, they're hoodlums within the same group of people? Because they're also just unemployed folks.
I would say they're more the hoodlum element.
Okay.
I mean, they may have come in as unemployed, but like she said, they prey on the other residents.
It's just weird. It's like they've identified them as something that they're calling ghosts, but basically they're just criminals. That line is fuzzy to me. It's like the lower class of the lower class.
I think your other description is better. What the ghosts are basically the criminals within the district. They basically rob and steal from the other residents.
It just seems weird that they also call themselves ghosts. Do criminals out in the real world call themselves criminals? You know what I mean? That's the thing that I think is weird.
They maybe don't see themselves as criminals, but they see themselves as then the gimmies are maybe giving up or working for the man. I don't know. That is a good question.
They do think they're no fun. He says that many times.
Yeah.
Now we jump to Dax watching the same news report in her steampunk outfit and fancy hair in the office of the David Bowie lookalike Chris Brenner.
Yep.
The report is talking about district employees being injured and taken hostage. There's no official count of sanctuary resident casualties, but satellite pictures show a grim reality. Dax is ready to head into the district to help Sisko and Bashir. David Bowie tries to dissuade her, saying she should wait until the police get everything settled down. Dax is very annoyed. She's worried waiting puts them at too much risk. She says they don't belong in there. None of them do.
Dax kind of calls out Chris here.
And then, just like many of the scenes between Bowie and Dax, it just sort of ends awkwardly, where Dax says something logical, and then David Bowie just stares at her.
Yeah, there's some odd editing there.
Yeah.
I think that might be trying to emphasize the fact that he doesn't want to really learn more about it. It's more convenient just to stand back and go, oh, the authorities will take care of it. I don't want to have to worry about it.
Well, that's a really important part of this story, that the people on the outside of the wall need that to be, like I said, completely walled off.
Yeah.
Within their brain, too. They just don't want to know because they don't know how to deal with it.
Or they don't want to make the effort of dealing with it, I think is part of the issue.
Sure.
And Dax totally calls him out on this, which is funny, really, considering Trill Society, as we've seen, seems to be entirely focused around keeping the symbionts happy. And all the unjoined rest of the Trill population seem to be disposable assets.
Right. That is a good point. Though that's mostly how it's looked at by the Symbiont Commission, not necessarily by all members of Trill or all joined members.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I think there's a much more positive spin on it that the joined folks believe.
So that, in some ways, is almost a similar thing.
That they see what they need to see in order to be happy.
Yeah.
But they're not aware of there being something that's walled off, where these walls can't be hidden.
True.
But it is similar, yeah. Now we go to the Defiant, Back to the Future, I guess. Kira is recording a log about history being altered. She says, we have no choice but to go into the past and try to find the others and correct whatever has gone wrong. I like how she says here that the only problem is that we're not exactly sure where to look or when. And going back in time is not the problem. Like time travel, no big deal.
Yeah, the time travel part's easy. It's just where to look is the problem.
It was just very funny. So Miles has narrowed it down to 10 possibilities. One of them has to be right, but they don't have enough chronoton particles to check every option. And then in comes Kira with a bandage over her nose, like she's Jack Nicholson in Chinatown.
Yes.
Odo and Miles share an amused look, but of course it's to cover up her Bajoran nose. Although I feel like the nose isn't that different. She could probably just not do that. But Miles suggests that she just say she broke her nose, which really irritates her. So instead he says he'll do the talking.
Yeah, she just folds her arms and gives him that look. That was very not helping.
Absolutely.
And I like the way Miles sort of reacts.
Yeah, let's just beam away.
Yeah.
Odo wishes them good luck and beams them away. When they land on a city street, Miles scans for a residual electrostatic charge while Kira starts calling everyone on her comm badge, but nobody responds. They'll automatically beam out in 30 seconds, so they just wait as some very dressed up folks pass them in the street. And Miles plays it cool, but Kira awkwardly says, I broke my nose. And she turns and looks the other way. It was quite funny.
I found it funny that she would be self-conscious in this situation.
Well, I was thinking about that too, but she doesn't have training for this.
Yeah.
Whereas I would say the Starfleet folks probably get a lot of training about dealing with other races and other cultures and other situations. And she's had none of that. She's just been trained to be a terrorist or whatever she was.
And now a military officer.
Yeah, it would be difficult for her to all of a sudden act. That's just not what she's had to do.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I thought this was a bit of a throwaway scene, but there is a poster in the scene about a boxing match. Did you see that poster?
No.
It apparently matches a poster seen in City on the Edge of Forever to indicate this moment may have crossed over with the original series crew being on Earth.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that was cool. Well, Miles says when he sees a vehicle parked on the street that it looks like it's the mid-20th century.
He looks at that vehicle and thinks it's the mid-20th century?
Well, 30 to 70 could be mid.
30 to 70.
Sure. 0 to 29 could be early. Mid can be a lot. It can be a long time.
Yeah, that's a very wide interpretation.
Yeah, well, he doesn't know. Why would he know exactly that a car is from 1930? Why would he know that? He wouldn't know that.
He's got a tricorder. Surely it has some memory in it.
He didn't look that up. He didn't Google that. He was busy looking for his crewmates.
Oh, I suppose. Yeah, it looks like it was the 30s.
Yeah, Memory Alpha says it's 1930, though they never say it in the episode. Because it's not important. It's like a throwaway scene. We've spent so much talking about this scene. We've spent more time talking about this scene than it actually took for it to air.
Well, we did have a plane flyover.
Yeah, that's true. Back to the DMV, and Hat Guy is annoyed again, but he's annoyed at all the new gimmies that Webb brought in. Sisko and Webb explain they need people they trust to watch the exits and guard the hostages while we sleep. They point out that other ghosts aren't trustworthy. Fine, Hat Guy says. His plan is to trade the hostages for amnesty, some credit chips, and a flight to anywhere, and he wants to go to Tasmania because Errol Flynn is from Tasmania, which is so peculiar and so random, but okay.
You know, this plan is truly bad enough to be a Deep Space Nine plan.
It really is. When they kind of, I don't know, they don't really mock his choice of Tasmania, but they do look at him like, what a peculiar plan. He's like, well, go wherever you want. And he's annoyed that they aren't impressed with Tasmania. Well, Sisko wants a better plan than that because there are 10,000 people living in the district. Hat Guy says let them get their own hostages. Webb thinks they should take advantage of the situation by using the hostages to shut down the sanctuaries and reinstate the Federal Employment Act, which seems like a thing that isn't going to happen because of just a handful of people working at the DMV, but at least it's a plan.
It's a better plan than going to Tasmania because Errol Flynn is from there.
Definitely. Hat Guy can't believe they're asking for jobs. He says there aren't any jobs, but Sisko thinks they'll have to find jobs for people because after tonight, they won't be able to ignore us. That's very optimistic.
Yes.
Sisko volunteers Webb to give the message on the net. He has a trustworthy face and a family, making him a good example of the population.
Now, question here.
Yeah.
Do you think Sisko is playing this by ear, realizing that Webb is a much better spokesperson for what's happening? Or do you think he knew that Webb was the face of the protests, or one of the faces of the protests?
Yeah, I don't know. I was wondering that too. We certainly don't find the answer, and we don't know if that's really what happened originally, or even if Sisko knew this guy. He may have been no one in terms of the history books.
Right. It could go either way, because
yeah.
From what we've seen, Sisko is very smart about thinking on his feet.
True.
And able to make the best out of a tactical or a strategic situation. And I could see him looking at Webb And even if he doesn't necessarily remember the history, he
No.
could see Webb as a good face for this.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Because he knows it shouldn't be him, and he knows it shouldn't be Hat
Yeah.
Guy. And here you've got Webb, who's a perfectly reasonable person. So he's a logical choice.
Right.
So Webb goes online, but before he gets much out, their transmission is cut off. Hat Guy's annoyed and says, nobody cares about us. Vin, the old Ghostbuster guy, says, why should they? You're a bunch of losers. I mean, Vin, man, come on. You're just not helping this situation at all.
What's the phrase? Read the room, Vin.
Oh, my goodness. This enrages Hat Guy, who's about to pummel him with his shotgun, but Sisko stops him again. And Vin says, check your email, buddy. You're a loser, too. I'm not sure why he said check your email. That's what the closed caption said. I found that really peculiar.
Yeah.
Vin says the National Guard is going to roll in sooner or later, and this will all be over. Hat Guy gets in Sisko's face, and he very calmly says, I really think we should kill this guy. He's playing this guy as almost comedic.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things I think we see. This character changes throughout the 2 episodes.
I mean, does he?
Yes.
Because he's always kind of menacing. He's always kind of quirky. He stabs Bell in the previous episode, but he stabs him under duress. I don't know that, he would have done that otherwise. And I also read on Memory Alpha that the writers of this episode were trying really hard to not make him just like evil. He's not that bad of a guy, but he's in a bad situation. And I think you see that because he doesn't just shoot the hostages or pummel the hostages. He threatens too many times, but he doesn't actually do any of that. And, we can interpret that Sisko is stopping it, yes, but also maybe not. Maybe he just is a desperate person in a desperate situation, and he's not really the evil murderer.
Right. That's what I saw the guy as. I looked at him as they started off showing this guy as if he was kind of the big villain.
Yeah.
But the reality I thought that they're trying to show with this is maybe he is actually one of the people with a mental problem.
Oh.
Maybe he has anger management issues, which could be helped and dealt with. So what you're seeing is someone who's not necessarily evil, but just has this anger that comes out.
Sure.
And that's why you end up with this character, I think, over the 2 episodes becoming more relatable or more human.
Well, the actor here is Frank Military, which is an interesting name. He doesn't have a lot of acting credits, but he does have some writing and producing credits.
Oh.
Well, then they get a call from someone named Detective Preston from the SFPD. And this actress is Deborah Van Valkenburg, who I recognize from all kinds of shows in the 80s, including Too Close for Comfort.
Yeah.
Well, she wants proof the hostages are alive, so Hat Guy drags the DMV woman over and sticks her face in the camera. Detective Preston asks to meet with Webb and Sisko by the main gate. Sisko gives Bashir his gun, and off they go.
I would worry about leaving Bashir behind.
Yeah.
Because Sisko, as well as having experience of command, is also quite physically imposing.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, and this environment that they're in right now seems to be very much survival of the strong. And a big guy like Sisko, it's funny when you see him next to Vin.
Oh, yeah.
Sisko is like a whole person taller than
Vin
him.
is very tiny.
Bashir, on the other hand, is quite a slim-build guy. He's not very big. I would worry about leaving Bashir behind, of him being either easily overpowered or not having that physical presence.
Yeah. And maybe not being able to use the gun if he needed to.
Right.
I think it's a good point, but maybe Sisko also doesn't think the situation is super volatile at that moment, or, he just was weighing which one was more important.
Oh, that could be a point. Maybe he had weighed up that BC is not as violent as he appears.
Yes.
That if BC is in a calm situation, he won't go off.
Right. BC is Hat Guy, we learned somewhere along the way here.
Yeah.
Well, out at the gate, Webb asks for breakfast for the hungry in the morning. She says she'll do what she can. She asks for one of the hostages in exchange, but Webb says no. They state their demands, the ones about the Employment Act and closing the sanctuaries. And also they talk about getting out from behind walls because they're just unemployed and don't deserve to be locked up. She says she'll tell the governor, but she doesn't look too optimistic.
Yeah.
Back to the DMV, and Bashir notices that the DMV employee woman, whose name in the IMDb page is Lee, but I don't think anybody ever says her name.
Yeah, I don't have a note for her name.
Yeah, to me, she's just the woman working at the DMV. Well, he asks if she's hypoglycemic and says he'll try and find her some meds and some sugar. She realizes that Sisko gave her a false name when she checked him in. And then she tells the story about how when she first started working there, she processed a woman who had a warrant out for her arrest because she abandoned her child. She couldn't take care of him, so she left him with a family that she worked for. The DMV woman felt so sorry for her that she just let her disappear into the sanctuary. She almost got fired when her supervisor found out. She doesn't know what ever happened to the woman, but she thinks about her all the time. Ever since then, she's just done her job and tried not to let it get to her. Bashir says it's not your fault that things are the way they are, but she says everybody tells themselves that, and nothing ever changes. And this is really, to me, the heart of the entire 2-episode arc, is this little story.
Yeah.
She delivered it beautifully, this actress, Tina Lifford is her name. But also I felt like it just wrapped up everything we'd been watching into this little story.
It's full of people just doing their jobs.
Yes. Well, doing their jobs because they feel like that's all they can do. And because there's really no other option.
And the sense of guilt.
And because she's inside the sanctuary wall, she has the guilt because that's where her job is located.
Yeah, because she's forced to see it.
Whereas the people outside don't see it.
Yeah.
And so they just flush it from their eyes. And so it doesn't happen. Out of sight, out of mind, which works really well for humans. Out of sight, out of mind.
But she really does seem to be suffering from guilt of her actions.
Yeah, she is suffering.
And at the same time having to turn off that feeling of I'm doing something wrong because it's her only option.
Exactly.
You either work there or you join them.
That's her only other option. If she loses the job, she becomes a member of the sanctuary. She doesn't want that. Well, now it's early the next morning and most of the ghosts are asleep, but still holding their guns. Sisko is pacing the room, yawning. Vin takes this opportunity to do something really stupid. He climbs to his feet and tries to make a break for it. Hat Guy jumps up, prepares to shoot, but Sisko points his own gun at the Hat Guy, and we go into a dramatic ad break. When we return from the break, Hat Guy asks Sisko if he's really going to shoot him. He says he thought they were on the same side. Oh, we are, Sisko says, but you get on my nerves, and I don't like your hat. That was so funny.
I love this. Sisko does this rant at him.
Yes.
Do you think Sisko was behaving in this way because it was a way that BC would understand? Or do you think he was that annoyed?
Well,
I find Sisko as someone too measured to break down like that and get annoyed. And I felt that was Sisko playing to the environment that he was in.
I think we should get to the end of this scene and then revisit that question.
Okay.
At this point, Vin stupidly goads the Hat Guy a bit. I don't know why this guy is such a troublemaker. Sisko tells him to shut up, and then Webb slowly positions himself between Hat Guy and Vin and pushes the gun down. Hat Guy at this point sees he's outnumbered, but also he's just not naturally evil, I don't think. And he kind of scoffs, and he says, you gimmies have no sense of fun. Which, this is, I don't know, the second or third time he said that.
Right.
Sisko then grabs Vin, drags him across the room into a quiet corner, and shoves him up against the wall. He whispers very loudly in his face, saying he's trying to save his life and all of the hostages in the room, and he is not making it easy. He says, you don't know what any of this is about. You work here. You see these people every day, how they live, and you just don't get it. But Vin does get it. He says, what do you want me to say? That I feel for them? What good would that do? And Sisko is just exasperated at this point, and he says, it would be a start. And then he pushes him back into the group of hostages, and he tells him to keep quiet. Sisko is breathing really hard at this point, and he slams his hand into the wall in frustration.
He is full of fury.
And this is why I wasn't so sure that he was plotting, and that instead he was really frustrated here, and he's sick of trying to deal with Vin. He's just trying to save the guy's life, and he keeps doing something stupid, and he keeps having to tell the Hat Guy to calm down, and it's just like constant. And I think it is a powder keg in that room.
Yeah.
You know, he feels like one bad thing would destroy everything. And he's holding the weight of the future on his shoulders. It's not just the weight of the people in this room. So I think he is frustrated. I think he's stressed.
Yeah, because I put this up there with as good as Picard's rant about the Borg in First Contact.
It has a similar feeling. Yes, I will give you that. I think Frakes as a director gets the importance of the Star Trek speech.
Yeah.
Another thing that's interesting to me here is they aren't showing like a lot of hatred or discrimination necessarily. It's just more resignation.
It's almost apathy.
Yeah. Like they're just all resigned to the situation. Like there's just nothing to be done about it. So, oh well. And the passion is only coming from those that are truly suffering and those that are new to it and are so shocked by it.
Well, yeah, the people who are on the outside of it.
Right. Kira and Miles beam into the same street, but now there is a van with flowers painted on it and lots of loud music playing. The music is so loud they can't hear each other and they keep kind of shouting. Miles says they're not there just as some hippies climb out of the van and hand them each a flower. And then the transporter kicks in and they beam away as they all give each other the peace sign. And one of the hippies is like, whoa. Again, just a silly, pointless scene. Yeah, but it was funny. Breakfast is delivered to the DMV as the detective promised. Bashir comes in with Webb's son, who is outside looking for him. Webb asks if his mother and sister are okay. I only included this little section here because the kid says they're fine. They're with the Petersons, which is also where Molly is all the time. And I'm starting to wonder if the Petersons family is like a running joke on this show. Over in the hostage group, Bashir is giving some meds to the DMV woman while Vin is watching. Bernard is looking at a photo of his family that I'm pretty sure was taken in the 80s. I don't know what was with that ridiculous picture.
Oh, with the hair.
Oh, and even just the way the photo looked, like the quality of it.
Yeah.
Bashir says he knows something good is going to come from all of this, and someday places like the sanctuary won't be needed anymore. The woman hopes he's right. Bernardo says he just wants to get home, and Bashir quietly says, so do I. Outside, the negotiating detective tells Webb and Sisko that the governor has agreed to a reduced charge of incitement to riot if they turn themselves in. He promises to form a committee to look into the problems facing the district's residents. So, uh-oh.
In other words, he's going to do nothing, but he's going to talk about how bad it is.
Yeah. She encourages them to take the offer because the situation can't continue forever. But Webb says to tell the governor if he wants to see the hostages alive again, he needs to do better. As they walk away, Webb said he was bluffing, and Sisko says he couldn't tell.
Webb's doing a pretty good job if he's managing to bluff Sisko.
Well, he's got a lot of acting credits. Well, now we go to an abandoned street and Dax comes up through a manhole and things finally get interesting as she jumps into the sanctuary district in her fancy steampunk outfit.
And if you notice, she's not wearing sensible shoes.
She is not. This outfit is not sensible either. I mean, the only way she could stand up more is if she were wearing her uniform.
Her pajamas.
She climbs out of the sewer. And Clint Howard,
yes,
Ron Howard's brother, comes up behind her and starts very quietly following her. He looks a bit off, very scruffy and dirty.
Yeah.
The street is totally empty except for the two of them. I also saw on Memory Alpha that this wasn't supposed to be Clint Howard. It was supposed to be Iggy Pop.
That would have been fantastic.
He had a conflict and he couldn't do it. So he appears later,
yes,
I guess, on the show.
Oh, he does.
So that was pretty funny, I thought.
Yeah.
Well, also, Clint Howard was a child actor on the original series.
Yes, he was.
Back at the DMV, Sisko and Bashir are trying to break through the computer lockout. Sisko tells him that according to history, the residents were able to get into the net and tell their side of the story, so there has to be a way in. This would be a good job for Dax the hacker. They could really use her.
Right. I wonder how Bell did it then.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, they talk about that. Like, well, how did they do it? They may have just made some different choices that led to different events. It's a good question, but who knows? Maybe Bell was a hacker like Dax.
Right.
Maybe Bell was friends with David Bowie. Maybe Bell knew Iggy Pop, and Iggy Pop knew David Bowie.
There you go.
That's how it happened, man. That's what happened.
Yep.
Well, Hat Guy comes in saying he has a present from some Dims, and they drag in Dax. When Sisko and Bashir see her, they actually look concerned rather than happy just for a moment. I think they're confused by her hair. That's the only thing I could imagine.
Right.
And we go into an ad break.
Why are you wearing a steampunk outfit?
Why are you in cosplay? After the ad break, Hat Guy says he's in love, but Julian rushes up to Dax and gives her a big hug, which disappoints the Hat Guy.
See, everybody falls in love with Dax.
It's the weird hair.
Oh, yeah.
Although her outfit is totally cool. It just makes no sense in this context.
Oh, yeah, there's no question. That is an excellent outfit.
Well, Julian introduces her to Gabe/Sisko.
Do you remember my friend?
And she's like, oh, hello. And then the Hat Guy introduces himself as Biddle Coleridge. This is the first time we hear his whole name. And Vin makes fun of his name. It's like, Vin, dude, okay? Get it together. He is just so much trouble.
Yeah.
Dax says she's been looking all over for them. She says she recoded her ID card to get past the sanitation department checkpoint and in through the sewers, which, by the way, Hat Guy was very impressed with. And this is also exactly why you should put her at the computer to let her hack onto the net, because I'm sure she could do it. Bashir and Sisko take her aside for a chat, and she's surprised to hear them say that they can't leave because they have to protect the hostages. She tells them that someone took her comm badge, which she set to emit a subspace distress signal. Sisko tells Julian to help her find the comm badge and then get out of the district. But Dax says if the Defiant locks onto her signal, they need to be together. But Sisko's not going to leave until the hostages are in police custody. If that happens, he'll head to the beam-in site. If he doesn't make it, he tells them to leave him. She grimly nods in agreement. But Julian says Jadzia has to leave because if something were to happen to her, doctors would find out that she's not human. but he wants to stay to help keep the hostages alive. Sisko smiles and agrees. He says, get the comm badge back and then come back. Before they leave, Dax says she thinks she can help get access to the net. And then they walk out. And again, this is one of those weird ending scenes.
Yeah.
It's like, well, why would you just say that and then leave? It was so weird.
I'm wondering if they had to do a lot of time cuts.
Like maybe she actually said why.
Yes.
And then they cut it because she says it again later.
Yeah, because you mentioned the cuts with Chris.
Yes.
This cut here is another one that seems kind of sharp. And I wonder if they had a real time crunch. So you ended up with a lot of very harsh, okay, we have to cut here.
Well, a lot of stuff does happen.
Yeah, it is a very packed episode. There isn't a lot of dead time in it.
So Bashir and Jadzia head to the location where she entered the district, and they head into the nearby building where they find Ron Howard's brother hiding behind a sheet saying, there's nobody here. Eventually he comes out holding the comm badge. He makes a whooshing noise and passes his hand in front of his body, and he says, I'm invisible. And Dax says, if you say so, which disappoints him. And then Julian says, well, we can barely see you. And he says, that's okay, as long as the aliens that suck your brains out through your ears can't see. And Dax says, oh, right, I am an alien. And he says, oh, I thought so. But you're a good alien. Right, Dax says. It's like this funny little conversation. She says, I'm here to protect the Earth from its enemies, but I need that piece of jewelry that you're holding. I understand, he says. Here, you take it. And she clips it to her jacket. You know, maybe people would stop taking it if you put it in your pocket or clipped it inside your jacket.
Yeah.
Why do they keep putting it outside? Oi.
She's very proud of her Starfleet insignia. That's the problem.
Apparently. So she says, shh, don't tell anyone. And Ron Howard's brother is like, oh, I won't. And they all smile at each other and leave. Poor guy. He needs some meds.
Yeah, it was all very low key.
It was. Well, outside, she drops back down into the manhole and tells Julian to take care of himself. He smiles and says, we'll see you at the beam in sight. He pushes the cover back over the hole and heads back to the DMV. Back to David Bowie's office, and he's like, let me see if I've got this straight. You want me to violate my interface operating license and override a government block and turn over my channels to a bunch of criminals. Jadzia thinks the public deserves to know why this is happening. The people in the district need a voice. Sooner or later, the government is going to retake that district, and a lot of people are going to die. If nobody knows why, the deaths will be for nothing. He says, well, I'll lose my license, but I'll get great ratings. Again, a weird ending to this scene.
Plus, as a billionaire, I'm fairly sure he's broken a lot of laws already.
Well, maybe not, because they make laws for the billionaires, don't they?
Wow, that's my level of cynicism.
Back at the DMV, Sisko now has a parade of people just telling their stories on the net. It's just folks talking about how they can't find jobs and they can't just get out of the sanctuary. This is the most depressing part of the whole episode for me. I mean, it's just awful.
Oh, yeah, like the one guy who lost his job at the brewery and has been there 2 years.
Oh, it was awful, yeah.
You can see this whole line of people, each one of whom is going to tell their story.
For sure, yeah. And I bet each story is just killing the DMV employee woman who is already so depressed.
Yeah.
Outside, the detective in charge is talking to the governor on the phone. The governor is ready to use force because he's heard rumors that the hostages are already dead. But she says it's just a rumor. She asks for more time, but she doesn't get it. They're going to move in at 0500.
Clearly, the governor has made up his mind.
Yep.
And needs re-election.
Exactly. Miles and Kira materialize back on the Defiant. They've not had any luck, and they've only got one shot left. They've determined that wherever they are, it's before the year 2048, because they were just in that time period and everything was wrong.
Oh yeah, Miles reveals that 2048 is worse than it even was in history.
Right. So they narrow it down to 3 possibilities, and Kira tells him to just pick one and hope we get lucky. So he picks one, and off they go.
This is so Star Trek. This is our last chance.
And magically, as soon as they land, Miles picks up the comm badge distress signal. Kira immediately calls Dax, and it's funny in this scene how unsurprised Dax seemed. It's like she knew Kira would call eventually, and also she was like sitting in her chair napping.
Plus, she's still got the same clothes on.
I know, I have that in my notes.
And she's been through the sewers twice. How bad can that smell?
Oh my God. Well, they pointed out earlier how bad everybody smelled in the sanctuary, so... Well, anyway, Miles gives their location and Dax heads out to find them. They disable all the comm badges so that they won't auto-beam out for 24 hours.
Small analysis point here. So they all disable their comm badges so they won't be forced to beam out. Well, there's 2 stolen comm badges somewhere in San Francisco.
Yeah, I know.
Did they get beamed back?
I wonder if they can disable them remotely or something. But yeah, I thought the same thing. They're just going to beam up some random people.
Yeah.
But I still stand by they melted them down and they're not operational anymore.
Okay, that's some good headcanon, yeah.
Back at the DMV, Vin and Bernardo are talking about baseball, which Sisko has some interest in. Bashir says he's into tennis, and the DMV lady says she likes soccer. Hat Guy comes in saying the National Guard has arrived. He could see them from the roof. Sisko ushers the hostages into a protected room, and he sends Bashir in with him to help protect them. Webb wakes up his son and tells him he needs to head somewhere safer. Before the kid leaves, Hat Guy gives him his hat, which I wasn't sure why, but again, I think they're trying so hard to show that even the ghosts aren't really criminals. Although, this guy has done some bad things, which we talked about, but they're trying so hard to show that he's not just a killer. And I think they did that pretty well. But this was weird when he gave the kid the hat.
Well, yeah, I think it just shows, maybe he is a guy with just anger management issues.
Yeah. I think what I read on Memory Alpha was they were viewing him as someone who, if he wasn't stuck in the Sanctuary District and he had a job, he's likely to have been like a mechanic, some kind of a blue-collar job. And that sort of makes sense, that you could see him as that.
Right.
Anyway, he cocks his gun in preparation for attack, just as some helicopters can be heard overhead. And we see on the wall, by the way, it's September 3rd, so they've been in there for like 3 days.
Yeah. So there's a helicopter overhead. Somebody in the building must have started recording a podcast.
Yes. Well, just then, the National Guard blows their way in. Hat Guy takes one of the National Guard out, but then gets shot himself. Webb, for some reason I cannot explain, takes out a gun. I mean, get down and protect yourself. That was a really bad move because he gets shot immediately.
Yep.
Vin comes running out of the back room shouting, "Stop shooting!" But the National Guard troop takes aim at him and fires as Sisko jumps in front of him and takes the bullet. The guard yells at Vin, but Vin says, "I'm a hostage, you idiot."
I was getting a very Hands of the Prophet vibe from that leap.
It wasn't quite as slow motion dramatic, but yeah, it was similar.
Vin needs to keep his head down.
Get it together, Vin. Come on. He just cannot keep it together.
Right.
Well, the National Guard dude takes his word for it that he's a hostage and says the place is secure. It seems a little bit easy.
Yes.
Vin says, "What's wrong with you people? You could have gotten us all killed." And the guard says, "There were rumors you were dead." And Vin shouts, "Do I look dead to you?" Nearly.
You had a good go at it.
Yeah. Well, the troops head out to some other skirmish as Bashir helps Sisko, who fortunately is not fatally injured. Vin is upset about how everything went down. Sisko grabs him and says, "The next time I tell you to stay down, you stay down." "Gotcha," Vin says. They rush over to check on Webb, but it's too late. He is dead, which is very bad. Out on the street, you see some paramedics are helping the injured as the National Guard is arresting people and pushing people around.
And you also see the camera pan, and there's a little girl on a stretcher, and you see with like blood all over her face.
Oh my God. Vin, Bernardo, Bashir, and Sisko come out of the DMV and survey the mess. There's just one sad kid wandering around shouting, "Mommy," with all of these bodies everywhere. It's very grim. Vin wonders how they could have let this happen. But Bashir says we have to stop it from happening again.
This here is the point that you see a change in Vin's character. He's actually seen people being killed up close during the storming of the processing center, and he's coming outside to see this is the outcome of the sanctuary. Bodies in the streets, people on stretchers. All of a sudden, it's become real for him.
Yeah.
He can't distance himself from it and just go, it's just stuff that's happening. And he seems genuinely shocked.
I agree. I also think he was starting to see the so-called gimmies of Bashir and Sisko as more human than he was used to, because he saw Bashir helping the DMV employee, right, when she had a medical problem, and he just helped her. And then they were having a light conversation about baseball, but then Sisko risked his life, jumped in front of a bullet for him.
Right.
And then they come outside, and he's just like, oh, man. Yeah, I think this was a big turning point for him.
Right.
Sisko asks Vin to let them go, and he says, all right. He'll switch their ID cards for 2 of the casualties. He says, as far as anybody knows, you both died here. Sisko thanks him, and they walk out of the sanctuary district together. Sisko asks them to tell everyone the truth about what happened here, and Vin says he would have done that anyway.
I like it. Vin still maintains that little sort of edge.
Yeah. Now we go to the Defiant, and everyone is relieved to see the timeline has been restored. Sisko is awkwardly resting in this tiny bed, which is half his size. When Bashir comes in with a data pad saying he found something interesting in the historical database. I guess now that he's been part of history, he finds it interesting and worth looking up.
Yeah.
And we see an entry about Gabriel Bell with a picture of Sisko. Sisko sighs, not looking forward to explaining that to Starfleet. And Bashir says it's a good picture, though, which was a very strange thing to say. He says he doesn't understand how they let things get so bad in the 21st century. And Sisko says, that's a good question, and he doesn't have an answer. The end. Well, overanalysis?
Well, this is a difficult one to do a lot of an overanalysis without having a 30-minute rant about modern politics and government. But there's enough podcasts about that, so I'll leave that one to someone else.
That's true.
The first thing, onto the subject of Vin. Ultimately, Vin is suicidal.
Oh, because he kept jumping out?
Vin seems like this cynical character, say things to aggravate BC, and I suddenly thought, maybe Vin is actually so riddled with guilt that he's actually suicidal, and that's why he's doing those things.
Well, it's an interesting take. I'm not sure if he's suicidal. I do think he doesn't seem to have much else in his life. Like, he doesn't talk about having a family. You know, maybe he had one and they were gone, or his wife was maybe gone, and he didn't seem to have anything else, and he was just going through the motions.
Yeah.
At the beginning of episode 1, where he asks Bernardo if he's an anarchist and, you know, he just wants to follow the rules. I do think he seems to work by a code. I think, you know, he's that sort of old school guy who, this is the rule of my job. I'm going to follow the checklist or, you know, the workflow or whatever. And I do think he was that person. But at some point, he had to start actually seeing what was in front of him and thinking about what was in front of him, and he hasn't been doing that. So I don't know that he was suicidal or maybe just kind of depressed.
Yeah.
And I think when he saw something different, he shifted.
Yeah, well, he definitely seemed to shift.
I also think if you have to spend a lot of time convincing yourself that the people who are in the sanctuary are not really human, like, they don't deserve anything else. They have to stay in the sanctuary. They're the others. If something happens to break that view and you suddenly realize, oh, crap, they are people. They are humans like me. They have feelings. They have families. They're willing to risk themselves to save me. Why? Maybe I've been looking at it wrong. It definitely twists your brain.
That's a good point. Next thing.
Yep.
The hat guy really doesn't seem to be that bad a person.
No, he doesn't.
And I think they did quite a nice job starting this guy off as, oh, he's just a thug. And then turning it round and going, no, he's more of a guy with issues, but is just stuffed into the Sanctuary District to get him out the way.
Yeah. Remember that line in the previous episode where Bashir was asking if they were like the Cardassians or the Romulans, you know, if things got desperate enough, would they give up their ideals?
Yeah.
I think in many situations like this guy is desperate, and whatever ideals he may have had went out the window because he needed to eat and he needed to stay alive and nothing else mattered. And I think that doesn't have to be an anger management issue, but it certainly pushes you to the limits of how you would maybe behave normally.
Yeah.
But little parts of his personality kept coming out. He was actually kind of a fun-loving guy, but he was not doing the right thing, you know, in this situation.
And that leads on to, I think it was interesting that Webb was kind of the inverse of his character.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
You saw the variance between the two people in the Sanctuary District.
Agreed. Yeah.
Next thing. I'm still really worried about these missing comm badges. I can't get over the comm badges.
They melted them. They're fine.
I'm really worried about it polluting the timeline.
Well, they actually, when they beam them up, if they're still active, they could beam them right out of the hands of whoever has them.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
That's the headcanon you should stick to. Yep.
That somewhat placates my worry about them.
Either that, or in this particular timeline, that's what finally led to the invention of cell phones.
Ah.
Because they don't have them.
Hey, that's a good one. Yeah, I like that one. And final point. So you've mentioned in the past how Kira can be a bit of a blunt instrument.
Yep.
And I thought here you saw her taking much more of a measured approach and much more of a, if you like, a stepped approach or a leadership sort of approach to fixing this problem rather than the blunt instrument.
I have something about that in the Women in the Future section.
Well, in that case, we'll leave that answer until Women in the Future. Okay.
Before we go to Women in the Future, though, I do have a couple of things I wanted to say in overanalysis.
Okay, go.
It's so interesting to me how Star Trek and other shows, I suppose, but Star Trek is the one I'm most familiar with, how it's just a couple of sets. They tell this just sweeping, complicated story, you know?
Yeah.
They're only in a couple of rooms with a handful of extras. It's such a Star Trek thing to tell a big story in a small way. I'm just so impressed with that.
And you know who's really good at that?
Who's that?
Jonathan Frakes.
True. Now, The Star Trek movies, I think, are sort of the opposite. They use big effects and big music and big drama to tell small stories. If you look at Star Trek The Wrath of Khan, for example, that's a movie about aging and love. That's what that movie is about. And it is huge and dramatic and, heartfelt. And it's so Star Trek. But it's like the opposite of this thing. And when I say that I feel like Discovery is a love letter to Deep Space Nine, there are all these lines in between that you can draw. There's parallels between what Discovery does and what Deep Space Nine does. But Discovery does it in the method of the movies. I know that there are people who criticize it. I mean, if you just discount trolls who just want to hate things, right? Just put those people aside because I don't care about them. But there are people who struggle with Discovery because it's more like the movies and it's less like these TV shows. It's less plotting. They do these big effects and these, the sweeping CGI and dramatic music, but they're doing what the movies do. They're telling really small, heartfelt, emotional stories inside of all of that. And they do it in the structure of what does Starfleet mean in that philosophy. And I just find it so interesting how different Star Trek can be, yet it's still Star Trek.
Yeah.
This 2-episode arc was just so old school. I am going to talk about social problems on Earth in the 2000s, and it's this humongous thing, and it's a watershed event that changes history, and I'm just going to tell it on a set that looks like I'm in the DMV. I mean, it's just so freaking great.
Right.
I just really, really love that.
I would agree with that sentiment.
Okay. All right, now we can go to women in the future. I got that off my chest.
Okay.
When the actress playing the DMV employee, who her character name was Lee, even though they didn't say it.
Yeah.
That story that she told about just doing her job, that was just such the heart of this entire 2-episode arc for me.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted to help, but when she tried, she nearly lost her job. And she recognized that that would mean she'd end up in the sanctuary. She'd end up in that situation that she already knew was hopeless.
Oh, right.
She was the most tragic character to me. She was so unhappy and she had no idea what to do or how to help anyone. She was so lost. And I just really appreciated that character. Even though it was a pretty small part, she did a lot with it.
Yeah, I would agree. She was the person probably in the worst position. Bernardo just wanted to get through the day and go and see his family. Vin was just checking boxes.
Yes.
Whereas she was having to live knowing the truth of it, that this was a dumping ground.
And so afraid. Because if she didn't just keep doing the stuff that she didn't believe in, what would happen to her? She would be in the same situation and no one would help her.
Yeah.
Just depressing. It's just terrible.
Right.
I was much happier with Dax in this episode than I was in the previous episode where I just felt like she was eating canapes and sipping cocktails instead of trying to find her way out. She actually did something.
Well, this time she is crawling through the sewers in inappropriate shoes.
Though she did wear that same outfit for an entire week, which I do not understand. It didn't seem like something a socialite would do. Now, there were a couple of things with Kira that I really liked.
Yep.
Her annoyance with the nose thing. I mean, she's not Starfleet trained. I think a lot of times that stuff that she's forced to do just makes no sense to her. Yeah. I'm sure she's just like, who cares? Just let me go down there. But when she told Miles at that last part to just pick one of the last 3 places to try, and you were talking about how she was sort of taking this leadership position, I was looking at it like she was just resigned to it. She was like, just do it. She climbed onto the transporter ready to go. She doesn't want to think about it. She just wants to do something. I've definitely worked with people like that. And I've definitely found myself with that thought a few times where I'm just so done talking about it. I just want to try something. Can we just go to the next thing?
We might have seen that a little differently.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
I saw that as Kira almost doing the opposite. The blunt instrument Kira would make the decision and go, this is what we're going to do. Here, she was almost stepping back and telling Miles to make his best guess.
Yeah, she
telling
did.
The expert in this field
to
basically do what he's paid for.
I get you.
You're supposed to be the expert here. You make the call.
Right. Whereas she had that moment with Dax back in Paradise, jumping all the way back to Paradise, where she was just going to beam over to the other moving ship, right?
Yeah.
And Dax is like, wait, why would you do that? And she says, do you have a better idea? And Dax says, I'm the science officer. That's my job, is to have a better idea.
Exactly.
You're right. And here she behaved differently here. She was like, okay, Miles, just take your best guess and, maybe we'll get lucky.
Right.
I think it was the use of the word luck that made me think she was just like, oh my God, let's just do something. I can't sit here. We've got to find the answer. And we've only got one more chance. You might as well just roll the dice. But you could be right. Yeah, you could be right.
You could interpret it like that. That's true.
Yep. All right. Well, my last point in Women in the Future, and maybe the thing that I'm happiest about, is that the David Bowie guy, Brenner, and Dax never made out. I feel like that is what ruined that Defiant episode for me and what made me so mad about it when it got to the end. And it certainly ruined plenty of movies and shows for me in the past where they just have to force a love interest when it doesn't make sense because they think that's what people want to see. But they didn't give in to that temptation here in this story. And I was really happy about it. I'm sure they discussed it, and I'm sure there was a temptation to do it, but they didn't give in to it. And so I really appreciated that in this story.
I thought it was interesting. He didn't even ask whether he would see her again or what she was going to do.
May have been cut, but yes. Well, that's my last note there in Women in the Future. So let's go to rating. I feel like I know the answer, but thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
Absolute thumbs up. Love this episode.
This episode makes me so happy.
Well, after the last few, yeah.
After the last few, yes. But also for the reasons I was talking about. Yeah. This is exactly the kind of thing that I really love about Star Trek,
I get it.
But I don't always love the shows with a message. Many times I will think, you're already trying to convince the convinced.
Yeah.
What's the point of you trying to teach me a thing I already believe in and I already know? And sometimes it can be, we talked about this in the previous episode, it can be so ham-fisted.
Yeah.
But this wasn't that. They resisted the temptation to hit us over the head with the sledgehammer, and they took a different approach. They took a more human approach, and I really appreciated it. And I absolutely give this a thumbs up. I thought this was great.
Oh, yeah. This is great Star Trek.
Yes. Okay. Well, finally. That's not true. We actually, season 3 has been very good. And then we fell in a pit of 3 terrible episodes, or at least 3 that I didn't like. But I was very happy to rebound with this. This was really entertaining to watch.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that is it for season 3, episode 12. Come back next week for lucky episode 13. In the meantime, if you'd like to tell us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, please email us at rebingeit@gmail.com. or tweet us at Rebingeit. You can check us out on talkthroughmedia.com. You can leave feedback there for individual episodes, and you can also check out the other awesome podcasts on our network.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.